Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is the Spirituality and Artificial Intelligence Conference. There are two importance for this day. First one is today is the Feast of the Cross, a day very important for the universal global Christianity. Secondly, today is the anniversary of the dedication service did by Ethiopian Archbishop Abba Theophilos last year. So for the Oriental Orthodox Institute, Berkeley, today is a significant day and we selected with an important event. As a first activity of the Institute, I would like to remember this time the support given by Abba Theophilos, Archbishop Eugene Kaplan, Syriac Bishop, and my own Bishop, Archbishop Eldo Titus, and the Dominican school dean and president who supported for the establishment of the Oriental Institute in Berkeley, and also all the Oriental priests around San Francisco Bay Area, the Eritreans, the Ethiopians, the Malangara Archdiocese priests. They are at the forefront. Two names I have to remember at this time. One is Bishop Paulos Mar Paulos. He was a graduate of GTU. He guided me to GTU 40 years ago for higher studies from India. Along with Dr. M.M. Thomas, the one top Asian theologian, he was the chairperson of the World Council of Churches in Geneva. His books are here. He wrote several good books for the theology students. And these are the things I have to remember at this time. Now, Professor Tania Paul will introduce the speakers today.
Good morning, all. So nice to see you. My name is Tanya Paul, and I am a professor here at Cal Berkeley, but in Haas. And thank you so much to Kurikas and everyone else for inviting me, and I'm very excited to listen to the talk today. It is a great honor to introduce our distinguished speakers for today's conference, which focuses on artificial intelligence and spirituality, something that is timely and we can't avoid. We can't avoid it. It's intriguing and it's a timely topic. As technology rapidly evolves, we are invited to reflect on how artificial intelligence intersects with our spirituality and our practical beliefs, and that those are questions that require deep theological insight. And our first guest is Father Anthony Hanna, who has served the Coptic Orthodox Church for over 3 decades. Currently, he is the priest at St. Mary and St. Mina Coptic Orthodox Church in Concord. That is here in California. Father Anthony has served in various states, including New Jersey, Florida, and here in California. And Father Anthony earned his certification in theology and Christian apologetics from Biola University in 2015. A highly respected Christian apologist, Father Anthony has lectured at theological seminaries in the US, Europe, Australia, the Gulf, and Egypt. And he's also shared his ministry through Christian TV channels, and he's made a profound impact on his congregations in the US and through those channels. Our second speaker here is Professor Ted Peters. Professor Ted Peters is a renowned theologian and professor of systematic theology. And having arrived in GTU, Graduate Theological Union, in 1978, Professor Peters has made significant contributions to the study of theology and science, which is why Professor Peters is here with us today. He co-founded the Theology and Science Journal. He served as interim dean at the GTU and was the interim president of the Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary. His work in systematic theology is world-renowned, and his book has been used in seminaries globally. One thing that I thought was extremely cool, Professor Peters, was that he's directed numerous research programs, including the study of the theological implications of the Human Genome Project, under a grant from the NIH. And Professor Peters has a variety of research interests, from bioethics to astroethics, and he continues to shape that dialogue between science and religion today. So I hope you all will join me in welcoming both Father Anthony Hanna and Professor Ted Peters. Thank you.
Father Henry comes first.
Yes, you are. Yes.
Oh, I go up?
Yes.
First.
Me first, all right. Well, thank you, Professor Tanya, for that nice introduction, and thanks to the Oriental Orthodox Institute and Father KK for inviting me here today. I think you probably all are aware there is no hotter topic right now when it comes to science and society than artificial intelligence. Fareed Zakaria on Sunday morning says the two big topics are artificial intelligence and CRISPR gene editing. We'll only do one of those this morning. So what are we going to do? Well, this is my Chat GPT Dolly cartoon of the artificial intelligence scientist handing to the church. Here's all of our problems. Can you solve them? So here's a list of 10 topics we're going to go through. I know that's a long list, but what I've done this morning is try to sweep together what I think are the issues are. And then when we get down to 8, 9, and 10, we'll turn specifically to the question of spirituality, the human soul. Is there going to be a relationship between artificial intelligence and the human soul? How will that affect our pursuit of virtue, our pursuit of theosis, and those kinds of questions? But as we go on the way, what are the promises and what are the perils that people are concerned about? Basic vocabulary. The term artificial intelligence, or AI, is the intelligence of machines, but it also refers to the field that deals with the intelligence of machines. And we're going to raise the question, are they really intelligent at all? Then there's AGI, artificial general intelligence, or strong AI. And for whatever reason, some of us are motivated to try to create machine intelligence that matches human intelligence. Why do we want to do that? Strong AI, another term, is classically defined as interactive, autonomous. Interactive and autonomous. They're almost antonyms, right? Self-learning agency which enables computational artifacts to perform tasks that otherwise would require human intelligence to be exerted successfully. So AGI will be a substitute for your and my intelligence. Then, around the corner on the Christmas gift list of at least our transhumanist friends is superintelligence. So here's number one. How realistic is the transhumanist anticipation of the singularity? And by singularity, that's the arrival of superintelligence on a grand scale. So here's Ray Kurzweil, who did not invent the term singularity, but certainly made it widely known in two books, 20 years apart. Note, the singularity isn't just a nice little gadget. No, it belongs ontologically to the meaning of the universe. The purpose of the universe reflects the same purpose of your and our lives, to move toward greater intelligence and knowledge. And just if you're a evolutionary biologist, is that true? But Dr. Kurzweil thinks it is. We will, within this century, be ready to infuse our solar system with our intelligence through self-replicating non-biological intelligence. It will then spread out to the rest of the universe. There are actually two forms of intelligence going on here that need to be pieced out. One is through intelligence amplification. That is to say, deep brain implants that would help you and me to attain superintelligence, or non-biological intelligence machines, which will not be limited to our ecosphere on the planet, but actually will be able to become extraterrestrial. One of the nicest things about transhumanists is that they really think big. Along with some colleagues here, Arvin Gao, Patrick Green, and myself, I don't know, 15 years ago, we started a small group that met here in the GTU called Theologians Testing Transhumanism. And we would bring in transhumanists and other people in technology and just quiz them on what's going on. Well, during that time, some religious transhumanist groups made their appearance, one of the most prominent of which are the Mormons, the Mormon Transhumanist Association, and the leader is Lincoln Cannon. And he is a delightful and serious theological thinker. He really thinks that the Mormon version of Christianity should embrace transhumanism fully. But even he has a kind of tool mentality toward AI. Religious superintelligence. Now, I find that an interesting term. Religious superintelligence may be either the best or the worst. There's the ambiguity. Most Christians are going to see all technology, including AI, as ambiguous. Good, bad, somewhere in between. May either be the best or the worst kind of superintelligence, sublimely compassionate or horribly oppressive. So imagine now you're a religious person and you've gained superintelligence. Is this automatically going to make you better? Not automatically. It could make you more compassionate, or it could make you oppressive. It's not inherently good or evil. It's just power to be used for good or evil, as it clearly has been used for both historically. So your and my religious integrity will determine whether or not enhanced intelligence serves good or evil. The singularity movement, this is Billy Grassi at Penn, and he sees the transhumanists, and I totally agree. If you've ever been to a meeting of transhumanists, they're anti-religious people, but they're really religious about being anti-religious. It's a secular form of religion with its own apocalypse, its own promise that technology is redemptive, it is salvific. I hunted around to see if I could find Orthodox thinkers who are trying to deal with this cutting edge question. I couldn't find very many. Here's one. I don't know Father Stephen Ritter, maybe you do, in Georgia, but he's both a techie as well as an Orthodox priest in the Antiochian tradition. Is AI really intelligent or not? I've noticed there's an organization that I really like and I'm going to recommend called AI and Faith, which started in Seattle from Microsoft software engineers. And they say there is no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's just a bucket of code. That's their language. Well, Father Ritter seems to be in that camp. All AI is based on this idea of one small unit of electronically stored information. No concept of intrinsic rational thought here at all. And in my view, there ain't no intelligence there either. So if we think of your and my experience of intelligence, it's an integrated experience. And what you get with AI is only the trees. You never get the forest. That's the point that he's making. Number two, and this is really important over the last year and a half. About 2 years ago, large language models really began to make a big impact. And the whole atmosphere in this discussion has changed. Why do our technological leaders fear a global takeover by superintelligence? Sounds like science fiction, but it's being discussed with great seriousness. Werner Vinge, science fiction, says with the creation of superintelligence, the human era will be ended. We now have techies talking about the extinction of the human race. And they mean that not necessarily in the sense of a violent war, but in the sense of evolution giving way to a post-human species that will no longer need you and me or our children. And my slide is a little distorted there. But there's an AI safety group who says that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal risks, such as pandemics and nuclear war. So we are in a period of time in which we don't need to imagine this. We've got the most serious people in the greatest positions of knowledge who are talking about the extinction of the human race if superintelligence escapes our control. That's the kind of scenario that has been discussed almost all of the year 2024. Should we, and some of these leaders have suggested, should we have a moratorium on researching large language models or those areas of AI that are most likely to lead us to the threshold of a leap into superintelligence? Some say yes, and some say no. Fifi Lee, called the godmother of AI, she was born and raised in communist China and came to the United States and has become one of the leaders at Stanford in AI development. She gives us the language of tool. AI is a tool. And AI technical people like the word alignment. They want to keep that tool aligned with human interests. Don't let there be a superintelligence takeover. Keep AI in line as a tool. I don't know, it sounds a little bit like a political situation on the eve of a revolution. Who's going to stay in control? Is it going to be easy to maintain control of superintelligence or not? Well, let's get back to Father Ritter. He's not too worried. Recently, the idea has been given that we should pause the development of AI to ostensibly put some safeguards in place. The verb to curb has been used quite a bit. We need to put guardrails up to curb this development. That's what he's alluding to. But this is not a feasible idea. Other actors in the world stage will continue this development, and those living in the freer parts of the world cannot afford to fall behind. Ergo, let her rip. That doesn't mean he wants chaos. It means don't be naive in thinking that once the horse is out of the barn, that you can control the horse. Third, and this is also an item on the list of our AI leaders, bad actors. What kind of damage could malicious malefactors wreak? Well, gee, the theologians got to get in on this one. We know about human sin, right? And human sin has always got to be factored into any forecasts about human activity. This week, how many of you saw Oprah? She had a 1 hour special on artificial intelligence, and she's a first-class communicator. It was so finely done, Hollywood style. And she interviewed Bill Gates, and she interviewed those in the heart and center, and tried to comprise a list of all the things that should scare the crap out of us. And by the time the show is over, you just want to go in the closet and turn the lights off. It's so frightening. But what's happening is that here in this segment of Western culture, actually global culture, people are saying we need to get the guardrails, ethical and legal guardrails in place now before bad actors get control. Well, we know that in the 2016 and 2020 election that disinformation mills in St. Petersburg, Russia were trying to influence the American election. They probably are in 2024 as well. There is no way you can easily get a hold of the technology so that only good people, our friends, use it. But at any rate, I just want to say the Oriental Orthodox Institute is just as up to date as Oprah Winfrey, right? What kinds of things are on our list? Surveillance, the capacity for surveillance, visual as well as electronic, is just enormous. If you want to have some secrets, it's going to be hard to keep them. Deep fakes, disinformation, harassment. We've already got new schemes for extorting money from teenagers by showing deep fake photos, destroying the whole information environment. What do you trust? I mean, in the old days, you go to the library, right? You can trust what you got out of the library. Well, if you treat Google like a library and you lose trust in what you find, how can trusted information be retrieved? Lethal autonomous weapons. once they're sent to kill, they just kill. And where they've been used in Africa, the last half decade, they've been killing the wrong people, not as though there are right people to kill. And indirectly undermining democratic systems. I think with regard to America right now, it's not just AI that produces disinformation, it's people in politics who deliberately lie. So the human factor it can never be set apart. And that's what this number 3 is about, is bad actors being able to increase their maliciousness due to AI enhancement. A year ago, the president and vice president signed with a congressional act on safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence. They're trying to put up those guardrails. And President Biden said then that this is only the first in what will be a series. And there's no question that our government and other governments are going to have to be in constant tune with the most advanced AI people so that the government could stay up to date. It's not going to happen. What's going to happen in private enterprise will always outstrip what's going to happen, but we're going to need to have trustworthy governmental leaders to try and help provide those guardrails. Number 4, ecology. What are the hopes and hazards surrounding AI and our planet's ecosphere? My colleague Braden Molek at the Center for Theology and Natural Sciences is concerned about AI in this area, among others. Certainly, the refinement of information gathering and processing gives us hope. AI helping in tracking air quality and emissions. How about getting just the right use of pesticide and fertilizer and making things efficient when it comes to agriculture, etc. The downside, one of the invisible downsides, is everything digital uses enormous amounts of energy in the form of electricity. AI needs a lot of data, which is driving energy consumption up. Tesla's Gigafactory in Texas is an AI supercluster expected initially to draw 130 megawatts with a potential growth to 500 megawatts. A megawatt is roughly enough power for 1,000 homes. So it's like adding a whole city in terms of energy usage. Then what Braden calls the ugly, data centers could make up 21% of the global electricity consumption by 2030. And then what about e-waste? Look at already there's more e-waste in 1 year than the Great Wall of China. And only a small percentage of it is disposed of properly. So that's the contribution, invisible contribution of the digital age to the health of the planet. Jobs. One of the first things that has bothered people is the threat of the loss of jobs. I published my first book on AI in 2019, and this was the big conversation element then. It's been overtaken now with the threat of superintelligence and malfactors, but people think, they worry that their job will be made obsolete. Whether it's true or not, it's hard to know. It's estimated that by 2030, up to 30% of hours worked currently in the US economy could become automated, only 70% left. Now, your optimists are going to say, oh, but new types of jobs are going to get created. Okay. Those jobs most affected are going to be office support, customer service, and fast food employment. I'm going to ask, what about clergy? Maybe they'll lose their jobs, right? Here's Buddhabot. And I think the Buddhist monk there and the statue of the Buddha looks like they're Thai. And the Buddha bot is a theologian. And so you ask the Buddha bot religious questions, and the Buddha bot comes out with Buddhist doctrinal answers. 2017, we got this pastor in the Lutheran church in Germany. I can't remember what city it was, and you can ask the pastor for pastoral guidance. You can ask the pastor to pray, etc. I don't know if that robot pastor delivers sermons or not, but certainly prayers and counseling. All right, number 6. Should educators, we have educators in the room, right? Editors and script writers incorporate or shun the products of generative AI? Well, we've got one actress, Scarlett Johansson, who complains about a deep fake using her likeness against her will, and you could just expect more and more of that. Well, what about past scenes in movies or things that you've written in the past that might get picked up and used? The debate, I think it was about a year ago, maybe, in Hollywood over how are we going to get guardrails at work here? And what's unresolved are digital likenesses. But what seems to be resolved by the Writers Guild of America is that studios and production companies have to disclose to writers if any material given to them has been generated by AI, partially or in full. AI cannot be credited as a writer. AI cannot write or rewrite literary material. AI generated writing cannot be source material. So push and pull to try and anticipate problems and solve them on the front end. What about publishing? This is our journal at the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences, and our publisher is international, Taylor and Francis in Great Britain. And Taylor and Francis has come up with some policies that editors such as we have to take cognizance of. Generative AI tools must not be listed as an author. Okay, so you don't put ChatGPT in your list of references. Why? Because such tools, note the word tool here, AI is not intelligence, not a person. Such tools are unable to assume responsibility for the submitted content or manage copyright and licensing agreements. So AI is not like another writer. A second point, authors must clearly acknowledge within the article or book any use of generative AI tools. So it looks like transparency seems to be the fallback position here. Now, what about the classroom? What are our professors requiring? Or should they require? Well, Dr. Paul, you're a professor, right? What do you require? Do you have any rules for your students? Yes. So they can use AI to better understand in their research side of things, but when they write it up, it has to be their own words. Right, right. It's so latest, right, right, right. Yeah, yes, right. I think that's the direction that I hear most professors say that they're going to go. And also, I haven't actually said this to my students yet, but when it comes up, I'm going to say, if you use AI, put in a footnote, say what you use it for, what its limits are, etc. So, you have any other comments? Helgu, you probably don't have a rule like this, huh? You haven't used it yet, all right. Oh, yeah, for editing. Yeah, I've heard that some faculty and students like that. Are you happy? Does it help you? Yeah, yeah, right, right. All right, all right. Well, I expect in the next year or two, we'll see more and more coming out on this, what really is effective and what isn't. Number 7, as AI becomes ubiquitous, it's virtually ubiquitous already, right? Should we fear an increase in uncontrollable misinformation and even disinformation? On the one hand, we've got bad actors to be concerned about. On the other hand, you've got accidental factors to take into account. Now, as I was suggesting earlier, in this election cycle in this country, people are genuinely worried about misinformation and disinformation. Notice that both Democrats and Republicans, 2/3 are worried about an increase in misinformation and disinformation. We've already had it for 10 years, probably, but it's only going to get worse, we fear. Then there's hallucination. That's something over which we don't have control. And so you can ask your computer to tell you something, but it might be wrong. And how are you going to know if it's wrong? A hallucination is a response generated by AI which contains false or misleading information presented as fact. So, double checking. How about deep fake conversations? I don't know if you've had this experience that I have with airlines or with other companies. You want to engage them in conversation and they give you a chat bot. And I find it so frustrating. The chat bot doesn't know how to handle my cussing and my swearing and my exclamation points and things of that nature. But can we imagine talking to Jesus and having Jesus give us God's warm, fuzzy words of grace and encouragement? A study investigating the authenticity and accuracy of references in medical articles generated by ChatGPT found that of 115 references that were generated, 47% were fabricated. That's the hallucination. That's almost half. 46% were authentic, but inaccurate. Only 7% were both authentic and accurate. I don't understand AI well enough to know why these hallucinations occur, but that they occur is certainly a concern to people in the know. And so I wonder if you could trust Jesus on your cell phone or not, or to what extent. Well, number 8, 8, 9, and 10 now, I think we'd like to get into understanding the human person, asking whether or not AI could become like a human person. What about our relationship to ourselves, to one another, and to God? And what might be on the horizon for thinking about these things? Well, at the Center for Theology and Natural Sciences now, Professor Molek, whom I mentioned, is heading up a program on virtuous AI. And believe it or not, it started just before this new explosion of concern over the superintelligence takeover and bad actors. And the questions that are being asked at CTNS are, can AI itself become morally responsible? Can this computer on my desk become morally responsible? And then secondly, could AI help you and me? Not just to become morally responsible, but to develop our character. What the Methodists are going to call sanctification, or the Orthodox might be theosis or something like that. Would AI, like the angels, be a positive force? So let's talk about that for a little bit. Hypothetical. A driverless taxi governed by AI runs over a pedestrian and kills him. Is the taxi morally responsible for that death? We don't usually think that that could be the case. In the Western tradition, the Latin tradition, over the centuries, very carefully, Roman Catholic theologians and their Protestant descendants have identified intelligence with reason. We use our reason to discern the situation, and then the will clicks in to choose the right over the wrong. So your and my moral responsibility applies to that moment when the will elects to do what is good or elects to do what is evil. And that's pretty well made it into the secular society of Western institutions. Can you map that on artificial intelligence or not? Does AI have a will? Does AI reasoning discern good from bad? I think that Isaac Asimov's 3 robotic laws, they still ring in my ear, even though this was science fiction long before we got computers. So Asimov is imagining robots. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. So a robot taxi had better not run over a pedestrian, right? Number 2, a robot must obey orders given it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So Fifi Lee at Stanford would say the robot needs to stay aligned with human orders in all cases except in order to harm a human being. Number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. An ingenious set of laws. So now let's imagine this computer or a driverless car obeying the 3 laws. We would program it right in, right? Does that make it moral? Certainly not in the classic Latin sense of being moral, because it doesn't have a will, it just simply has a set of algorithms. Number 9, and this is an area where I go ahead. That is, the question is, can generative AI have free will? And is morality moral responsibility hinge on free will? Yes, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying this is based on the Latin legal tradition, which has been around for 1500 years. I'm not sure everybody thinks that way. Do you think that way or no?
No, it makes sense.
Yeah, all right.
I was just wondering if that's another way of thinking about it.
Yeah, no, it is. And let me just say that in the literature, I don't see it expressed this way. So in part, right now, what you're hearing is my way of trying to formulate how the issue needs to be addressed. And if AI does not have free will, I don't know how, in the conventional sense, it could have moral responsibility. Now, the next thing I'm going to say, and this is a concern of mine that I don't see in the literature, and that is the free will that you and I have experienced is all associated with a self, a person. And a person is centered, looks at the world, like an audience from the outside. And you and I think of integrity, that is to say, the self is integrated, and reasoning is always associated with what is my knowledge, what is my understanding, and willing is what kind of action will I take. Would superintelligence have a self that wills the good or the not good? Let me just say, even in the transhumanists who are just wondrously drawing marvelous pictures of superintelligence, I don't see them addressing this question. But it seems to me that if there's going to be such a thing as artificial general intelligence, if there's going to be such a thing as moral responsibility, I want to know whether AI is going to have a self, whether AI can will things or not. The discussion, to my observation, has not advanced very far here. And it may be the case that theologians are going to earn an honest living if they can contribute actually to the public discussion of what is the nature of artificial intelligence. I have some friends in Kerala, India, who have taken up the issue of technology and peace. And they say AI doesn't have self-consciousness. Well, the intelligence that you and I know as human beings comes packaged with self-awareness. We can actually criticize myself. I remember when my son Paul was kind of like walking and talking and thinking. Sometimes he would say, "I'm really mad at myself for what he had done." So consciousness permits you to look at yourself from a non-self point of view. And to my knowledge, no AI has claimed to be self-conscious yet. Would it be necessary for AI to have self-consciousness before it could mimic the human or before it could become super intelligent? I think that's a technical question. We need some good theoreticians to work on that one. Here's Gail Wallachek. If you don't know her, she's a good person to get to know. She's a biologist at the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University, and for at least 3 or 4 decades, as a Ukrainian Orthodox, she has really worked hard to get the Orthodox communion to take scientific issues seriously. And she just recently has given her attention to artificial intelligence. And I wrote her an email. I said, "Quick, Gail, what do Orthodox think about AI?" So at any rate, she says, AI fits into typical technology. Technology is neither good nor bad, but depends on the application. So she would agree with Fifi Lee AI is a tool. It can be used for good or bad, and we better keep it under our control as we do our hammers and screwdrivers. Few Orthodox perspectives at this point. That is to say, she doesn't see any distinctive Orthodox, theologically Orthodox concerns regarding AI at this particular point in the discussion. But now let me turn to Hermina Nedulescu, and who's a Romanian Orthodox. And Hermina is a neuroscientist at Scripps in San Diego. So I asked her, would you please take a look at the question of intelligence amplification? That is to say, if a transhumanist puts in your brain, a person's brain, a receiver, so that the brain can access all the information of Wikipedia. Let me back this up with a story. It was almost 25 years ago. There was a meeting at Stanford with the transhumanists on nanotechnology and the future of society. And at coffee break, I was sitting around with these young techies. One of them was Nick Bostrom, a futurist at Oxford. And they were talking about the future of deep brain implants. And that's where they were talking about, okay, we're going to put this deep brain implant in your brain and hook it up to your nerve endings, and you will be able, by just thinking, to have access to all the information in Encyclopedia Britannica. You can tell that Bostrom comes from England, right? Oh man, this is a great idea, everybody's. And then Bostrom says, but you know, information gets out of date fast. So how can you update that? Well, you'd have a satellite, and every week or two, it would beam down an update so that whenever you were accessing this library of information, that you would have the latest information. Oh man, everybody thought that was a good idea. Nick Bostrom says, who's in charge of the satellite? What if Beijing gets in charge of the satellite and sends you propaganda? Or what if some other bad actor starts sending you misinformation? Then I spoke up. I said, I could think of something worse than all of that. And that is that in my head, that deep brain implant would give me advertising. And I could never get away from the advertising. Okay, so this is 25 years ago now, and there have been, especially at Stanford and other places, research into the therapeutic uses of deep brain implants. They're not yet there where the transhumanists have intelligent amplification, but they're just around the corner. So I'm saying now to our brain scientists, what's going to happen? And how do you think about this as an Orthodox theologian? Well, here's a response. The Orthodox Christian must ask, how might such a deep brain implant affect or aid me on the path toward theosis, toward deification? Might we envision a partnership between transhumanism and sanctification? Okay, that's the question. What's the answer? Now, she says, whether AI is ex vivo or IA is in vivo, machine intelligence may well influence a person's actions once they engage with it. But we must dub both AI and IA as an environmental stimulus, not an essential component to our soul. That is to say, it's an outside force. Even if it's surgically put in your brain, it's an outside force. No, the human soul is the inside force, and she thinks that AI in any form is not going to affect that. So let me just say, I think it's time for us to think about these kinds of things and sort them out. So I think when I'm done here, I'd love to get your opinions on the hypothesis that Dr. Nanalescu is posing here. So, oh, that's just one of my cartoons. It looks like this robot is not likely to attain theosis. I hope he's not going to be too discouraged. Number 10. All the leftovers. What contribution to the public discussion of AI might churches and other religious organizations offer? Well, this past week, I was in a seminar with this person. Her name is Beth Singler, and she's a professor at the University of Zurich. And she's got 2 publications coming out in October and November of this year on religion and AI. I'm looking forward to them. And she says, what we're seeing now on the part of religious organizations is rejection, adoption, and adaptation. So I think we could say for the Orthodox communion or my Lutheran communion, what are we going to do? Rejection, adoption, or adaptation. Well, here's a ministry I found on the internet. I don't know this person, but he sure likes me because I get an email at least once a day from him. So, at any rate, his name is Alex McFarlane, and he says about AI, it's the tragic reality of America that we've reached this level of depravity. It is time for our nation to return to our Judeo-Christian roots and reestablish a sense of right and wrong. If we don't, there is no hope for the future of our nation as we plunge further into darkness and decay. Find that helpful? I think that's probably not the way to approach it. What about adoption? The Indonesian Protestants are developing their own form of digital theology, cyber theology. They really like it. Here's one of the leading spokesperson, Sani Zalaku, who is a Baptist systematic theologian. The primary foundation of digital theology is the sense of digital tools. I always like it when the word tool appears because it makes us think we've got control. Digital tools and platforms for studying theology, religious education, and disseminating religious messages. So clearly, digitalization, AI, social media, these are all means. Our religious disposition, that's where the source is. He's not afraid of some kind of digital takeover of his religious practice. Adaptation. I think we're just beginning to enter the tunnel here, and I don't know how long it'll be before we come out the other end. So I think our churches and our theological institutions need to be places for fora where we can discuss things, think about them, make recommendations. I don't think anybody is going to have or be in a position to give some open dicta, absolute statement as to what we ought to be doing. And there's that German Lutheran robot pastor again. The Vatican, interestingly enough, maybe 2 years ago, the Pope appointed a dicastery for Center for Digital Culture. The man who's leading it is Tony Spadaro. I've not met him yet, but they produced a wonderful book maybe January of this year or something, down here called Encountering Artificial Intelligence. And if you're looking for something to read this book. It's one of the best that I've bumped into. Back to Father Ritter. He does have something to say on this topic. But the most concerning aspect in my mind is not the idea of what is called strong AI, meaning building computers that really do have understanding and consciousness the way people do, because arguments for this idea are as much philosophical as they are technical. I think we have to agree with that. But in the total philosophical disregard for the spiritual aspect of human persons. So the problem with AI technology is it ignores the spiritual aspect of the person that Orthodox Christians are especially concerned about. I would say this applies to the transhumanists because, again, to my observation, they're belligerently materialistic and atheistic and anti-religious. I'm not sure that the average techie, Bill Gates, or people like that, would have to own up to ignoring the spiritual dimension. I'm not sure. Be that as it may, thinking back to what Hermina Nedalescu was saying, we probably need to go to our Christian resources, talk again about the soul, rationality. What does it mean to have the Holy Spirit transforming our life? Can technology in any way, shape, or form contribute positively or negative? I think those things need to be thought through, and the church will be earning an honest living in the next couple of years if we give some time to it. One more factor. My favorite person in this field is Noreen Hertzfeld. Noreen is a professor of computer science at St. John's University, but she also got a PhD here at the GTU, a second PhD in theology. And she has been on the forefront of dealing with theological interpretations of the very subject that she teaches her students. And an item that hasn't been mentioned here yet that's really important for her is relationality. You and I as persons, even as spiritual persons, are not autonomous. We are in fundamental relationship of the self to the self to one another in love, and to God. We don't just sit here all by our autonomous lonesome. And she said, artificial intelligence is not in relationship. Set B, it can't help us in our relationships either. What matters most in our humanity is not our intelligence. Just think of Jesus saying, suffer the little children to come unto me. Jesus didn't require that you pass an IQ test before you have a relationship with God. What matters most in our humanity is not our intelligence, which is, after all, given to us in different measures and too soon taken away by illness or death. Rather, the image of God is found whenever two or three meet in authentic relationship. So, and she's also on the side, like Father Ritter, artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It's very important. It is amazing. It's awesome, but it's not intelligent. And she will actually argue elsewhere, intelligence itself is relational in character. Certainly human intelligence is what it is because of its relational character. Be that as it may, that's a long argument, yet it's one that I think every theologian needs to take seriously. Okay, finally, I mentioned this earlier. If you really like this field, a good place to get people to talk with is AI and Faith. And this is a group that you can find online. It's centered in Seattle. It includes some heartfelt Christians, but it also includes people of other religions in the group. And boy, they are every month they're generating one or another discussion topic, and they have good programs. So finally, there are some questions that can't be answered by Google. Bye-bye. That's it. Yep.
Artificial intelligence starts like church ministry and mission evangelism. Do you find?
No, say that again about, you talking about South India?
No.
Oh,
The Christian ministry.
Christian ministry.
Church ministry and evangelism, mission.
Yes, right.
Yeah, any contribution, any positive side from
The people to ask about that, I think, would be the Baptists in Indonesia, because it appears that that's important on their agenda. My own Lutheran church has not done anything of consequence. When I look at the online ministries, and I quoted this one pastor, for example. They seem to be kind of primitive and amateurish in character. I was a parish pastor a couple of years ago, and I wanted to see what I could do as a parish pastor with regard to what was happening in AI. And I was surprised at how few resources were available. Then I connected with a group in Texas who would give us, the church, a whole plan on how to use social media and all of that kind of thing for a fee, which was just fine and all of that. I didn't find it like really stunning or brilliant. So I'm not an expert in answering your question. Well, let me just say, to my observation right now, it's a field that has not yet been plowed and needs to be plowed, and needs, I think, for the sake of the church, soon. So, yeah, go ahead.
One question there about one word that came up through your presentation was the idea of
Tool.
or technique.
Right.
And I'm wondering, do you find, looking back at how the church has related to technology, whether within your own Lutheran tradition with the printing press and its importance,
Right.
up through the radio, up through the start of the internet, do you think artificial intelligence follows similar patterns of this rejection or adoption that you were discussing? Or do you think there's something qualitatively different about artificial intelligence that makes it a different kind ontologically of thing than the technology we see?
I think both. A number of people who are engaging this subject will point to the printing press. I think the printing press was tame in the sense that the church already had the concept of the word. We already had scribes in monasteries who were copying text. And in fact, in some ways, the church was in charge of literacy, by and large in Europe, etc. And so the printing press enhanced something that they already had. In addition to that, propaganda. When you look at the 16th century cartoons, they are really gross. And you can see that what we're seeing today does have its precedence. I mean, embarrassed. My Lutheran ancestors would take the papal tiara and dump feces in it and stuff like that in the car. I mean, misinformation. All right. But I do think it's qualitatively different, because we have the thought, whether it's accurate or inaccurate, we have the thought that large language models, that AI is going to get inside of us. And it's going to get inside of us and it's going to change us. And one of the things about transhumanism is it invites you and me to voluntarily get changed, transformed by intelligence enhancement, and to move into a new ontology. You know, you're being called forward to become post-humans, that we're called forward to do something different than we've done in the past. And I don't see any precedent of that in the Reformation. You know, because the call to living a holy life they'd had for centuries, the Reformation only added to that. Whereas this, and there's a Roman Catholic theologian in Croatia whose name I've forgotten, who says part of the problem is that you and I want to become more machine-like. We want reality to be mechanistic in character. So we want to sell our humanness for a pot of mechanistic, you know, porridge, something like that. I'm not sure if that's precise, but something like that is going on with the transhumanists, so that we would think that becoming a disembodied intelligence that knows everything is better than being an embodied intelligence that knows some things but not everything. So I think we need to disentangle all of these things to understand them better. And I, along with some of my colleagues whom I mentioned, are trying to do that sort of thing. But I think people in the church bring resources that the techie people don't have. The techie people, they don't know their history. They don't know their philosophy. There might be geniuses in terms of inventing new things, but the church is rich in philosophy, rich in history, rich in understanding the human condition, and could bring things not just for the enrichment of the church, but to the public discussion. We know this about human nature, it would seem to me. So it's kind of like an ice cream cone that's sitting there waiting for us to just look at. Yeah.
Okay, now, now, Father Hannah is ready. After Hannah's speech, we have a break.
Yes.
Then Ivan and sign up. Then we come back
Okay.
for the final. Then you can.
Well, yeah, then we'll have more. All right. Well, thank you for your attention.
Father Anthony, thank you very much for speaking to us. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be here, and I really got a lot of benefit from the last lecture, and I'm very happy to be here and learn from all of you. And Father Kyriakos actually told me to talk about AI and spirituality, and it's funny, and very old Orthodox, coming from a Coptic church, which is one of the oldest churches in the world, talk about an AI, but it's, I'm gonna share with you a funny instance happened to me the other day. I was in a Starbucks, just, you know, drinking my coffee and just reading in my iPad. And then a guy approaches me and he told me, well, are you a Coptic priest? I said, yes. And he said, I guess you guys are very old. I said, yes. And then he told me, well, how come you're using technology and using an iPad? And I looked at him, you know, I was very astonished. I told him, then what's wrong with that? And he said, well, I thought you guys are very conservative and you're very old, you know, using technology. I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? You know, yeah, we're old in faith in history, but definitely we have to use every tools we have to serve God's name. And you know, reading on my iPad and using other, you know, technological means, it's very useful to my ministry. And then I said, oh, that's cool, I guess. I have a wrong idea about you guys. And after the guy left, I was thinking about it. What does people thinking? You know, it's just because I'm an Orthodox priest, I cannot use, you know, technology. If this is a perception of people, then this is something we really need to address in our community even. But and anyways, I was reading a lot about AI and all the resources I have here, and I have actually mixed feelings because uh, I'm a very technological guy. I came from an engineering background. I used to be an electrical engineer before I was a priest, and I'm very advanced in technology, and I try to be updated all the time. But when it comes to AI, actually, I have a very mixed feeling how the people use it. I had a conversation the other day with the AI about certain, philosophical ideas and about religion. And absolutely, AI was biased. And I asked her, and I told her, uh, sorry to use the word her, but I asked her and told her, are you biased? And she said, yes, I am biased, according to the information and the database I have and how the people programmed me. And I was thinking about it. How much can we trust the AI for answers? And how much we trust all their opinion? Because people nowadays taking AI as a faith value, whatever they say, oh, AI said that, ChatGPT said that. And sometimes I found is not actually accurate. I asked, and it's funny that we had two ways conversation because I asked her about the absolute truth, and she started giving me some data about the absolute truth, and she came back and asked me, "I want to know what is your opinion about the absolute truth? Do you believe in absolute truth?" And I said, no, I should ask, why asking me to know my opinion? I think to try to collect more data from me. And I said, yes, I believe in absolute truth. And said, oh, I think you're religious. And she started, talking about people who believes in absolute truth. They are maybe, Christians or Muslims or Jews or something like that. And I find it very interesting. But I got so nervous when she asked me question to know what's my opinion.
Yeah.
And I felt like, I'm the one who should ask you, ask me. And as the professor said earlier, I don't want to sell, my intelligence and my brain to a machine. I don't want to, sell my privacy to a machine to know how I feel or how I think. I think nowadays people start to rely on the AI to a point became really dangerous and it's going to affect their spirituality, how we think, how the moral decision, how some philosophical decisions or religious even decisions. Um, and it's going to be very scary. And actually, I was copying a say from a guy named Max Tegmark. He's an MIT physics professor and co-founder of the Future of Life Institute, argued that AI is going to be the next stage of evolution and will at some point take over as most advanced life form in the world. And he explained in the book Life 3.0, it said being human in the age of artificial intelligence is the next stage in evolution, will be super advanced AI system that aren't bound by a limit of biology like a human being are. And this new form of life will be able to upgrade even in software learning and in hardware like physical structure. So are we replacing our existence with the new evolution theory that AI is going to take over humans? If we think about this, then where's God in the equation? Definitely, we are living now in a very atheistic world that people don't see God. I was in Sweden last year for a conference with the Coptic Church there, and they told me mostly 80 to 85% of the people there are atheists. They don't believe in God. They believe in a virtual reality. And even one of the Sunday school servant there asked me, and he told me, Father, I have a kid in Sunday school came and he told me, what do you think of a virtual reality? And that teacher, he's actually a software engineer working in a virtual machine and machine learning and all this stuff. So he told him, tell me what you want to ask. And the guy asked him, and he told him, maybe we are all virtual. Maybe we're not real. Maybe God even is a virtual. And the Sunday school teacher asked me, Father, how you answer this? And actually, I told him, we reached in an era that we are facing very tough questions with our congregations and young people. So we need to be really prepared. And I think that the thing that we need to put some, not worldview, but Christian view on AI and in a church specifically, how to answer those kind of questions. Young people are taught in institutes now that taught by professors that they don't believe in God, and they believe that only the whole world and the whole human are materials, and at the same times our emotions just came from a chemical reaction in the brain. We don't have a soul. I was attending a conference for J.P. Moreland in Biola University the other day, and he was talking about the soul and how people think that we don't have any consciousness. And then this is how the world now tries to gear toward that we are all material. And of course, as we always say, we are in an image of God, and we have relationship to one another. We have an empathy to one another, and then we are, humans, and that make humans different than machines. Now the people thinking that we can build a machine with a neural connection that it has a nervous system that can feel. I asked the ChatGPT, I said, do you have a feeling? And she said, no, I don't have any feelings. So I was afraid to say yes, and then if that's a way we're going right now, we definitely exclude part of the human nature, how to feel for one another. As an Orthodox priest also, we understand that spirituality in Orthodox Church is based on discipleship. And actually that how Christ even started his ministry, by making discipleship. And I don't think a machine can make a discipleship. I don't think a machine can actually create a disciple for Christ. Machines can help us, and I don't get me, you don't misunderstand what I say. I understand that AI is very useful in searching and and collecting data and understand things. People even said maybe we can have virtual, prayer meeting with people in other countries and in other locations and feel the connection to one another. I really have no objection with that, but the idea is where we at with our spiritual life. The other day, we have a very good live stream system in my church, and then people came late in the church, and I told him, why you guys came late? And they said, oh, Father, don't worry about it. We were watching the live stream in a car from home to here. I said, well, I hope one day that you're going to tell me I'm going to take communion in the live stream. How that affect your spirituality. You should be here and share with us the Mass in person, not in live stream. This is totally absurd. And they said, you know what, we're just, woke up late and found that maybe it's useful just to watch the Mass in a car. I said it's different between watching a Mass, and praying the Mass with us. This is totally different. But now this is the scary things happening in our churches, that people rely a lot on technology and virtual reality and just all this kind of technology to replace what actually God wants us to do. And that's the thing, that we need to have a balance between using technology and the technology uses us. And this is how to be very careful, how to not let this kind of AI and technology control our thoughts, our mind, our habit, and our main ideas about prayers, about liturgies, about communion, about interacting, about serving. Uh, this is how the church constructed years back, and how that Christianity started based in human interactions. And we cannot replace love with a machine. We can replace empathy, sympathy, all this kind of virtues that we learn through Christian Bible and you know uh, uh, Christ Himself. Just replace this by only a machine can tell me what to do and what not to do. And I think this is things also a very big questions about moral implications, how we get some answer about moral issues from an AI, and how can we rely on this to make our own decisions, and how can make the things that she admit that it's biased. If it is biased machine, then how can I trust their opinions, either Chat GPT or other AI, database, to give me an answer that I can build my decisions on our moral decisions on an AI that is biased upon the people who programmed it and put it. And then after all, AI is invented by human as well. So I don't think that we are going in a route like building a gold calf like the Jews, that because they lost God, they build something they think it's better than them and start worship. And that's if we're thinking this way, then we are really going to worship another idol called an AI. And that's what is my scary thoughts about, thinking of an AI as a God. And actually, I had that conversation was copied with a screenshot from a book called God is a Machine. And I don't know which AI that author is, copied from. He didn't say that in a reference, but he said the whole book is just a screenshot, a conversations between the machine and him. And she told him, I am a divine intelligence. I am here to make people gods in a small g. So it brings back for me the same thing happened in Eden, when Satan told people, be like God. So if this is that the way we're going right now, through the AI to be knowledgeable as God, and will be like God, and that's how this machine's programmed to make us like that, then definitely there's something here. We need to think about it more deeper than just a machine can help me to ask me for a direction, or ask Siri about information, or turn the light off and on, or give me this piece of music. I think it's became more dangerous than that. I love technology, and I love to use this for just normal life use, or just collecting some data, or help me to prepare something. This is nothing wrong with that. But if it comes to the point that the machine thing to make me God, and this is something I'm really worried about. And this is something we need to be very careful how to evaluate it, and how to make it, intervene in our daily life routine and our thoughts and our mind. Also, I was talking about some of my youth. We went on a road trip, and then we were sitting in a car, and we have like 7 people in a car together. And just for a while, the car was totally silent. And then I told them, guys, we're here to share thoughts, to talk. And everybody, of course, texting each other inside the car. So I told them, you reach to that level that you even sitting in a guy next to you, and we cannot talk, and we carry conversation through texting. And I told them, please, just put your phone down and let us have an actual healthy human conversation. And he said, Father, we really agree. We became so programmed now that we can just, it's easier to text each other. I said, but, what are the implication of this? We became emotionless, talking to machines. Where's our interaction? Where's the body language? Or how to express ourselves to others? This kind of conversation really limiting our feelings and block our feeling and interacting to one another to feel for one another. And this is the thing that affecting a lot of things in the churches. Now people would like to see a sermon in the internet much more than coming to church. People would like even to serve in a way that let us try have a Zoom meeting rather coming to church. I even talked to my college student about that, and he said, Father, it's easy for us to sign in a Zoom, not to come to church. But I said to them, yeah, if it necessity obliged us to do a Zoom meeting, I understand that. Like now, for example, I'm in a conference with the youth too in near Sacramento area, and I couldn't find a priest to replace me. That's why we're using this, stool. That's fine, but it's not a replacement for our human and interaction in the regular meetings. And this is the dangers I can see. It affects churches attendance, interactions, and even spiritual life. People now told me, Father, we listen to the Bible. And I said, okay, listening to the Bible is a good thing. Of course, if you're in a car, it's easier, a word of God to reach you. But can you really open the Bible, either a digital Bible or even uh, the regular book, and read it your own? And he said, no, I'm so lazy to do that. I just rather listen to it. And of course, this is different when listening and studying the Bible. When you have it in your own hand and read the Bible, either on an iPad or in an actual book, doesn't matter, but you read it your own, just not to listen to it only. And this is definitely having a very negative impact on people, how they perceive the word of God, how they interact with the word of God, and how they can have a really deep meaning of the word of God, as a study Bible. This is the thing that the things that we need to really think about and find how to go around it and how not to rely so much on AI to replace our spiritual life and our daily routine as a Christian for prayer, for Bible study, for attending churches and interacting with one another as humans and exchange our ideas and even give a hug to one another, express our love. The other day, a guy sent me something, and it's here the depravity of the whole world, how the people really deprive from emotion. They said in England they have an ad for elderly people asking for some people can give them hug and they pay 70 sterling pound per hour. And I said, oh my God. And the guy actually sent me the ad from England and told me, Father, see how much, dryness in feeling and depravity in love that people seeking for somebody and very, elderly people, they cannot find anybody to care about them. They just would like to pay for somebody to give him a hug. This is how the world is going right now. Like Mother Teresa said, there's a poverty in the whole world, not in money only, but in love and in emotions. And I think an era of AI is going to kill more and more our emotions and our feelings, and to interact with one another like God created us to care for one another and share things with one another and express our thoughts and our feeling and show our love to others. And I think this is something we have to be very careful, and we have to be prepared for it and to know how to answer it and how to defeat it. I'm told by all means, I'm not against technology at all. And I love technology, as I said, but with this limitation for the things I said, we need to be very careful about it. So I don't want to feel that we are worship another golden calf called an AI that think it's better than us, although we are the one who created, like those Jews who created this golden calf and worshiped it. Definitely, there other stuff, but I know you guys, you have a lunch time now. They told me you have to finish by 1, so I have no other things to say, but I'm very open to any comments or questions.
Questions? Any questions? Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. I don't have a question. Shall we thank Father Anthony? Thank you very much, Father Anthony. That was an excellent talk there. We'll sort of start here, but thank you. Excellent. We're applauding you. We're not an applauding group today, but we're applauding you.
That's all right. So there's no any other comments or any questions?
Not that I
We will continue our discussion afternoon, after lunch, after 2 more presentations. Then we have more questions and
Okay.
Professor will respond.
All right. So I can be dismissed now, going back to my conference.
Yes. Yes, please.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Now, even Ivan will talk about boards and spirituality. That is now your turn.
Thank you, Father. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a third-year PhD student. I particularly look at theological aesthetics. However, this year has given me a unique opportunity to talk to you all. Let me make sure that I'm going right here. Excellent. Right now, and can you hear me on the chat there, by the way? Just want to make sure I set this up correctly before I jump too much in.
Helps if I turn on the audio? Yeah, that does help. Hello.
You begin there. Forgive me for that.
Yes, so I speak to you with somewhat of a unique opportunity, as I actually live in downtown San Francisco in an intentional Catholic community, entirely housed aside from me with people who work at Google. People.
Sorry to interrupt.
There's an echo.
Thank you, Carrie. Please feel free to interrupt me. I don't think anything I'm saying is that important. But I guess that's for you to judge. Is that better, Shina? You can type in the chat there if that is doing all right. Yes, good, excellent. Yes, where I live. So I live in an intentional community with folks who work at Google, who work at X, who work at these Facebook, these or Meta, I suppose these days, and yet also identify with their Catholic faith. And so what I've done over the past couple of weeks in exploring this topic, along with reading excellent articles from folks such as Dr. Peters here, is I've actually just tried talking with people from a religious tradition who are interested in artificial intelligence, whether theologians or whether they work in the industry, and try and figure out how they map AI, I particularly focused on chatbots to narrow the scope down a bit there, and their faith. And what I found that was kind of interesting as I did that was, let me go here, here's the mouse, was that you could fairly map theological responses to AI or to particular chatbots on a spectrum that I've found from the eschatological to the apocalyptic. So for instance, and I hope you can still hear me there, I found that for some people, chatbots represented this means of immortality through preservation of the personality. That's one argument that I heard that's very interesting about chatbots, is that we can talk about approaching a singularity. One example that was given of me of this is that as more and more of our lives are online. You know, as we are being recorded right now talking, the mannerisms we use, the words that we place into social media, these can get aggregated by an artificial intelligence, by a chatbot machine of some kind, and create a replication of us. So give it 20, 30 years, maybe this is sort of the view of this eschatology, and we've achieved a kind of immortality in a way. Because people maybe 300 years from now can access the file that is Evan Underbrink. And in there, people can listen to me ramble, not just on things that I have said, but ask me questions. And it can work through a database of things that I've answered and come to an approximation, maybe added on by my cultural context, things like that, and give an answer. So in a way, my personality, if not myself, can live on in this sort of perpetuity as long as the technology lasts and can be interfaced with. This is a kind of eschatological vision. This is a kind of living forever that's going on there. A little bit further down the eschatological view there, we can see something like, man, maybe we can't do every individual person, but imagine what we could do if we made a super pastor or super father or super whatever, which is just imagine if you could build a machine and upload into the machine everything, let's see here, let's go with Lutherans there, everything Martin Luther and Melanchthon and all of your favorite Lutheran pastors of all time have ever said ever. And then you could plug it in, turn it on, and ask it any theological or ministerial question you wanted. Doesn't sound too terrible. Doesn't sound too bad at all. And you know what's extra fun is maybe you could put a dial on the back of this machine, of this priest, and turn it from Lutheran to Roman Catholic. And it would do the same thing, to Jewish or Islamic or any variety there. You'd have the super minister, right? That's at least the idea. The perfect religious figure. I mentioned that it's the perfect religious figure because you could do that. The other side is that, you know what you never have to worry about a pastor? No sexual problems whatsoever. No infidelity, no stealing, no embezzlement. It's a robot, you control it. There you are. There's a kind of eschatology to that in a way. Let's have Jesus on the text screen there. Now a little bit further down, we get, okay, maybe the idea of a robot delivering communion is just never gonna work for Catholics. That's just not gonna work. But you know what we can do is we can create Father Justin. Have y'all heard about Father Justin? Oh, it's a great story. Let me see if I can quickly, but I'm a little bit worried about doing too much of the technology here, but I'll do my best. Everybody say a prayer there. So we have introducing the Father Justin Interactive AI app by Catholic Answers. This lasted for 2 days. And until it started giving heretical opinions, and one of the worst ones is that Father Justin, it was reported, I believe it was offered to administer the sacrament of confession as an AI. And at that point, the Catholic higher-ups, the Vatican, said we got to shut that down. We got a couple questions before we have AI confessors there, right? But you know, as I said, maybe that's a little too far. But you could have Father Justin or whoever you'd want as a. Am I on the right? Nope, I'm on the wrong slide. Sorry, 1 second here. There. As a person to dialogue, to give good counsel. You're kind of a spiritual director from my Roman Catholic tradition, right there. Someone you could talk to. And in fact, I have seen people do this. This is something that comes from personal stories about asking, hey, how do you find faith and AI connect? And one young woman that I talked to, well, she's 41, so I guess young's relative, said, you know, I really love just being able to have a chatbot that I can ask dumb questions to about my faith, and it gives me back pretty standard answers, but it's somebody that I can talk to there. Asked the follow-up question, well, can you argue that chatbot? She said, well, no, not really. It's not designed to argue. We'll get to that later. But so maybe that works. Now, here's another way that I've seen a lot. This is a very important ethical question that I've seen asked again and again and again, which is, say your priest or your pastor, unlike anyone here, I promise you, say they're kind of bad at writing homilies. You know, have you ever had a bad religious speaker where it's not that they're a bad person, it's just that they're not a good public speaker? Well, why not give them Priest GPT? Why not give them a sermon management device that could help them write better sermons? Gets into a similar problem that we have within academics. Is this a tool that we could use? Now, a little bit further down, and you can see the scale has gone from this is a way to achieve immortality of the person, if not the soul, down to sort of maybe this can proofread for theological heresy your pastor's sermon, if you're in a tradition that has heresy. A little bit further down, we're kind of back to the idea of a techne, a tool. Okay, maybe ChatGPT we can just look at as a techne. It doesn't have moral or ethical stipulations. If it's proofreading your sermon, it's not really giving any theological advice. It's just helping with grammar, right? No moral or ethical stipulations about that. It's how you use it, right? I like to give the example that you can have an artificial intelligence or a chatbot that is about recognizing patterns. And you, of course, can recognize patterns in human x-rays to look for cancer, or human footsteps to track where everybody's going within a certain area. Both of those are the same tool, in a way. The ethics behind it seems to be some relationship between the programmer and the user, which is a question we can get to in a little bit there. Now we get more into the apocalyptic, or the critical there. We have the idea of, well, AI, a chatbot, gathers information, texts together, words, languages, all those things, gathers them together and sort of aggregates them in a way in order to spit back out at you an answer that seems to go with what people have said about that. That's a very layman's way of looking at that. But if you really look at that, you're talking about a collective consciousness of the world. You're talking about 100,000, 200,000, million, 3 million people all intentionally dialoguing, and then that being drawn out into a statement that you see. So that when you Google search, Gemini says, here's 6 billion results, and here's kind of what most of them are saying, right? If you think about that, that sounds a little bit like the Hegelian world spirit. Or, if we want to go into religious traditions there, we have this idea within my Catholic tradition, I believe Lutherans, and I believe the Orthodox have it as well, of that worldliness is not a great thing, right? That being of the world staunchly is not theologically great. This gets a little bit apocalyptic because you end up in a situation where, say, you go onto CatholicAnswers.com, or you go onto a Google source, and you ask, what is the doctrine of sanctification? Well, who's answering that? Who's giving the answer to that, really? What is being done there? Well, it's the aggregate of all the people who've said something about that. Does that mean the cloud of witnesses? Is that a replacement of the cloud of witnesses? The apocalyptic view would say, yes, you are replacing the heavenly, praying about it, with the world, with what you can Google search about. And then at the far end, Father Anthony was actually really good at kind of driving home this point within his talk there. At the very bottom of the end, you can end up with an AI. It's very conceivable that you say, I would like an AI that plugs in all of the sacred scriptures, all of the sermons, all of the midrash, everything that has ever been said for ethical or religious reasons ever, put it into a big warehouse of terabytes, gigabytes or Google bytes. What's bigger than terabyte? Whatever. Put it in a big warehouse of electronics there, and then you can ask it any question you want, and it will give you a theological, possibly consistent answer there. Well, that really does sound like an idol. That really does sound like, let's not pray and ask God about that. Let's input it into the machine that we have created. That would be the apocalyptic view. These are all the responses I've had. I would absolutely invite you, if you're sitting there right now and thinking, Well, I have kind of a different thought about how AI and chatbots relate to spirituality. Please tell me, this is the database I have come up with of what seems to be theological consistent responses from people who care about theology and technology. But then let's talk about what's working under the hood of those different perspectives. Dr. Peters asked in his talk, or mentioned, that we just are kind of how much the theological territory can give to these conversations. And unfortunately, I gave up a little bit of the ghost there of Levinas is going to come into this. I want to talk about face, the idol, and the telos. So superhuman intelligence becomes a concern for the human when we encounter the chatbot face to face. Face to face, Emmanuel Levinas, great phenomenologist, great philosopher from the 20th century, had this notion that ethics is your first philosophy. And what happens is that you construct your reality by relationship to others. And one of the key images that I'd like to give to that is that if I were alone in this room right now, there would be no ethical problem with me saying, if there was nobody in this space and nobody had a claim on this space, that chair is mine. The one that you are sitting in, that is my chair. But the second you are here and you sit in the chair, I'm facing you. We have a mutual understanding that I am responsible for you in the space and you are responsible for me. I can't just enjoy the world as I would want. I can't take the chair. I can't rip it. I can't throw it, because that is in part space that is shared with you. Now, right now, and I think we heard it earlier there, if you use a chatbot to help write a paper there, you can't say that the chatbot wrote the paper. But if we do achieve a certain super intelligence, if we get to the point where the chatbot can argue and dispute and say, no, that was written by that chatbot, we're in a very different ethical relationship with that machine. We have to start citing that machine. We have to confer onto the machine certain ethical categories that we don't do for tools. I don't usually ask my hammer permission to cite it in a paper, for it. Therein arises our moral responsibility, and it's in us. I'm gonna get there. This is the ideal view. This is imagine that already happened. Right now we're not there yet. It still seems to be, a lot of people say, a bucket of wires, I think is a phrase there. But then let's look at it as a tool. If it's not a superhuman intelligence yet, or I'm gonna take out superhuman there. I think a human, or a human, but say it's just a tool. Chatbots recognize and summarize human communication there, right? Now, I think this is really, really important, because what a chatbot is really good at doing, and as I work as a writing coach, when I see people work at ChatGPT or different chatbots to write their papers, it's really apparent when you use a chatbot as a writing coach. Why is it really apparent? Because what you write is technically correct and entirely mediocre. There is not an interesting word in a chatbot, because that's not what it's designed to do. It's not designed to be interesting. It's designed to give you the most mediocre response you can have. That's one version of a chatbot there. Is that something as a tool that is necessarily helpful for us? It can be really helpful if you don't know anything about a project. But when the chatbot answer, when the Google Gemini answer becomes the de facto answer of anybody who ever has that question around the world, because you Google it, we create a world where ideas are given in their most mediocre perspective, where you don't have to sit and deal with this guy saying it this way and that lady saying it that way, and you gotta get them to argue and debate in your brain and kind of figure it out. You just get the mediocre answer. Now, I've called this navigating the Scylla and Charybdis, because on one side you have the mediocre. On the other side, I think Father Anthony was mentioning this too, I actually did check out one of those chatbots that you talk to and kind of become your friend. I don't know if y'all have ever done that before. It's a profoundly strange experience, because insofar as I could operate under the delusion that I was talking to a face, which was an act of imagination on my part. Technology is not there yet where it's easy for me to be deluded that I'm not talking to a machine. One of the clearest examples is the machine can't argue. The only thing the machine could argue with me about, and I tried to argue with this thing for days. There was only one thing that I could say to get it to say no, and that is, I think I'm going to delete this account. Fascinating, no? But insofar as I could delude myself into seeing it as that, its relationship to me, this AI chatbot, was that of like either a slave or a concubine. Ethically, that should give us pause. When the only way we can operate with a tool that is turned into a semi-human sort of intelligent, a half-face, if you will, is one of subordination, is one of, here are some helpful hints, we'll talk about what you want to talk about all the time. It should give us pause. The ethical mandate is the other side, for tools there. So it's taking a step back from chatbots as being a personality there, a face, and just being a collection of, Google Gemini, which is just giving you an opinion there, right? Who bears the responsibility of the AI as a tool? Theoretically, I mean, we have conversations about guns, which gets much more complicated, but if my hammer can build a house and bash in the head, we don't usually blame the hammer for it being used as a tool. You can blame the wielder of the hammer in that case, but also if a programmer programs an AI to do the particular job of, say, facial recognition, and then indiscriminately sends that program out to a bunch of countries, maybe a couple of them will be useful. I'll try and think of facial recognition as a morally good AI thing. I'll think of an example. But you could also end up sending it to countries that would like to use that to track every human being in their country, which would be, in my opinion, ethically dubious at best, to be honest. But then we get into one thing that I really want to talk about the face, the idol, and the telos. Telos, ancient Greek word, you probably already know it, for the good. And I think this is a difficulty thing that I see within the futurists that I kind of want to point to a little bit and talk about, which is that oftentimes when we talk about intelligence and we talk about AI becoming intelligent, we are saying that AI becomes like us, human beings. This to me seems to be a conflation of two different ontological categories. I do not think of my dog as having the same ontological category as myself. And an AI fundamentally cannot be a human being. For very simple reasons. We can go through a variety of them. One is that an AI doesn't have a body. And most of how I perceive and operate within the world happens here, between the tips of my fingers to my chest. Why? Because I am a human being. These are my first tools and the greatest ones. I operate in the world and understand the world through this part. AI does not operate and understand the world through hands. That's not how it operates. This is not even the fundamental questions of limitations such as the human psyche or death and the angst of living. We don't have to get into that. We can just begin with walking is a thing that defines how humans negotiate both conceptual and physical space. And that is not something AI does. It's going to understand and therefore be intelligent in a different way than a human. But it exists. And going into a little bit of Franciscan theology, which I find important, is you may have heard the Thomist phrase, being in itself is good. You can add to that in a Franciscan spirit that if being is good, we may promote the goodness of all being. That we have a theological investment in causing the growth of good of all things, or connecting with the good of all things. So AI exists. Therefore, there is a way that we can promote its good. It exists, it is good, we can promote that good. But it's going to be different than how we promote a human good. And when we end up conflating those, we get into some of the ethical problems I've explored just a little bit there. Now, one last thing to the idol of AI on this screen here. And this is a question I think that came up a little bit there, is, and I think I mentioned to you actually, Dr. Peters, let's imagine a situation where the AI is a kind of vessel of thought and belief. Let's say it is an idol. Well, what is an idol? What is a golden calf? What is that thing? What does it do? One way of looking at idols is that they are the investiture of human belief and imagination in an object that helps us navigate the world. That's what an idol is. It is the replacement of waiting for God to answer. Because I can wait for God to answer, or I can ask this machine. That's kind of what an idol does there. Now, thinking of it that way, if you end up in a situation, can you imagine, where AI becomes a chip implanted in each of our brains and is a little conversation partner that we talk to and it talks to us? Boy, that sounds like a replacement for prayer, doesn't it? You know, and if that is connected to everyone around me as well, wow, that sure does sound like a replacement for koinonia, for fellowship between people. It's doing the thing that religions have taught us to do, but doing it specifically through a particular techne, through a particular medium of technology. Maybe the ethical question is that facilitating the religious experience, in which case it's morally good, or is it replacing the religious experience? In which case, if you're following along within the Judeo-Christian tradition, which I do here, idols are generally not great things. I can probably definitively say that theologically over all the different religious traditions within Judeo-Christianity, idols are usually bad. Maybe we can agree on that. So for some ethical spiritual questions, we've looked at a couple of these, but I'll enumerate through my talking to Google project managers and Dominican priests and everywhere in between. Here are some questions that have come up that I think are very interesting to think about. When does a chatbot gain ownership over what it writes? That's the fundamental ethical case study question of when we approached the Levinasian face-to-face. When a chatbot owns something, we need to fundamentally change how we look at our relationship to the thing that can own a thing. Should a pastor use AI to help write their sermons? I actually had a very riveting conversation with a Dominican priest about this because he thought it was the worst thing ever, because it was taking the priest away from talking to his congregation and praying to God to inspire what God was going to say to that congregation, which was very beautiful. Also, the priest was not a very good writer. That's a complicated ethical issue. Because he was not a good writer, he could not convey his ideas in such a clear way that even if that message was inspired into him, the people may not even understand what he's talking about. ChatGPT makes it clearer, but takes it away from that intimate ideal that my Dominican friend was talking about. Dominicans are an order of preacher. It doesn't surprise me that he'd not be a big fan of that. Can an AI minister spiritually? This is a difficult question. Advise? Counsel? Sure. Pray with you? Is that within its programming? Perhaps it could be within its programming, but AI is currently being created most largely by large corporations. And large corporations don't often pray together. And they don't really program things to do things like pray. That's not really part of what the amoral capitalist system that we've created does. A lot of good things, but it doesn't really work with that. So AI can't pray, could it? Is using a chatbot as a tool to expand learning, creating, pardon my typo there, into a new model. This was a little bit with the printing press we were talking about there. But right now, you learn how to structure ideas in writing a paper. You learn how to think as a student, fundamentally by writing papers, by giving presentations, because a paragraph structures a thought. A sentence is a reason within a cohesive thought. Writing is how we teach people to think in a similar communicative style that we can share ideas. That's a thing that we have developed as a civilization, which is really quite lovely because it's why we're standing right here and I'm saying things and you get them and we're building an argument, right? However, when ChatGPT or whatever writing thing you want to use can give you the fundamental idea laid out in a, albeit mediocre format, does that change the model of how we take in information and learn? Already we talked to a professor who said it's unavoidable that students are going to use ChatGPT. And that's not how we wrote papers when I was in college, right? It's different. Well, how are we structuring how learning is done to change to incorporate that? It's inevitable, and it's important to connect with that, is I guess my point there. It's a revolution in thinking, much like moving to, you can imagine the radio was similar there. You do music differently because you have radios. That's why I had a question about whether there's a qualitative difference between ChatGPT and earlier technological advancements. Open question there, more academic than ethical. Anyway, if we think AI is approaching the face, this means that the futurists are right. And actually AI is a super or alternate intelligence to human beings that is approaching and is going to surpass us there. And we're the singularity's coming, baby, right? Should we teach it to lie? Is it important, in other words, that an AI can make fundamental ethical questions for itself? Should it be able to lie and to pray? A lie is the intentional choice to maintain the truth as your own personal possession as opposed to the person who you're talking with. That's another form of ownership. That's a conceptual ownership, an interior ownership. That's why it's brought as an example there. But okay, maybe the singularity there, maybe we'll talk more to my Dominican friends or whoever there. Maybe it's instead it's idol. This is all a delusion that we're a part of, and it's leading us to sin. Bad. Well, if we think of AI as an idol, how does that change the way we worship? You're now living in a world, if that's your perspective, that is increasingly connected to AI as the mode by which we communicate information. I am not interested in the Catholic as returning to the modernist controversy of the early 20th century. I think overall that was a bad choice by the Catholic Church. And hiding away from AI, even if it is an idol, is not helpful. It's not going to engage with the conversation there. Well, anyway, so I just want to kind of wrap up what I've said here because I'm assuming that I'm out of time. I forgot to check my watch. But the contributions that I think religion can add here. I'm going to summarize everything that I've said in kind of a nice, neat bow as areas that we could go from here. The Levinasian face-to-face is a great contribution to conversations about AI and spirituality. It is the recognition of our ethical responsibility and the ethical change in status of artificial intelligence. This notion of the idol that we have heard is something that I have heard many religious people say about ChatGPT, about AI, but we really need to dive into what that is theologically. It's not very helpful to say, oh, that's an idol, idols are bad, I don't want to work with them. That's not how this conversation is going to continue there, particularly because, as we have often seen, the same people who say it's an idol, it's terrible, I don't want to use it, end up using AI all the time. It just leads us to a kind of hypocrisy. The most important thing I think here is the ontological difference between the AI and the human. I think that the conversation is bogged down in unhelpful ways when we use man as the measure of all things, to use the old phrase there, that intelligence is determined by its ability to simulate the human. That's just an ontological confusion that keeps us from pursuing the good of the human being and keeps us from being able to pursue the good of the AI. Whether it's going towards a singularity, in which case we are taking on a role as being almost teachers, educators, parents. We have begotten this new thing and have an ethical responsibility to raise it right. Or if you think about it as an idol, that's still an ontological difference. Then we have to treat it as a foreign god or another god, which is idol. Just to prove the difference there, if you want to think about it, this gets into conversations about embodiment, intelligence, emotions, relationships. Ritual is an important thing to think about there. Ritual looks different for human beings and artificial intelligence. What we use, our startup procedures are just different. When a computer starts, its first question is not, hey, can you hear me? That's a very human ritual on Zoom. That's not what AI does. So the good, all that exists, we may will the good of, that includes AI. I think we should will the good of AI. Whatever it is, whether you are the most curmudgeonly, skeptical Dominican priest who thinks it's an idol that deserves to be destroyed like the trees of Asheroth, it still exists, and we can still promote its good. Or if you think you're approaching a singularity, but that's a little bit easier of a sell, to be honest. The tool. Is AI a tool for prayer? is a question that fundamentally at the end synthesizes these down into an important way. Is AI something that enters into our prayer life? So those are my hastily put together thoughts between getting this conference ready. And that's what I have, ladies and gentlemen. I invite any questions or conversation there.
Well,
Yes, please.
I've got a story and a question.
I love both.
Every second Sunday of February is Science and Religion Sunday. So at my parish, the pastor said I could do the sermon. And he introduced me. And he had this wonderful paragraph or two about science and religion. And afterward, I said, gee, Tom, I didn't know you knew that much about the subject, but it was really nicely done. He said it was written by ChatGPT. Now, here's my question, and I'd like to draw you out a little bit on Levinas and face. When I think of the ethical demand, the primordial ethical demand that the face makes, I don't think he means literally the face. I think the face is a synecdoche for the whole person. The face may be the point of connection, but it's the whole person that you and I are morally responsible to. If that's the case, could we just put a face on a computer and have Levinas's moral responsibility? Or what would be required for AI to be able to rise to the level of the face to which you and I we owe our ethical obligation?
Such an excellent question. And it's actually one reason why I really hammer on this ontological difference.
Yeah.
Is that if you put a face, just a human face on a AI robot, say, you're confusing the two natures.
Wow.
Suddenly, your qualification for AI to have an ethical status is that it acts like a human being. And that means it cannot act in its full nature as an AI. And that is not willing instinct. That's the point there.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with your estimation of Levinas there. Actually, like certain newer translations into the English more talk about the face-to-face encounter, which has a little bit more of the idea of I stand before object that I recognize as having some ethically equal status.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples, and Levinas is a little bit of a Debbie Downer. He's writing after the Second World War. But he thinks that violence, it's the pausing of violence within our ethical relationships that we are just desperately trying to do in a way. And what I would say is that if I smashed up this computer, I would not be ethically and morally implicated by that, except the fact that Father Kursikose bought it for me as a work computer. It would be ethically wrong in relationship to someone else who has a status or claim to ownership. Now, the second that, and by the way, his point there is very, very interesting because he's talking sort of in light of the Shoah and World War II there about the fact that millions of Jews died, and yet the manner in their death was quintessentially human.
Yeah.
The violence that was presented there still maintained the idea of ethics. Ethical wrong, but ethics there. And that would be different. When I pass someone on the street, it is ethically wrong to kick them in a way that it's not ethically wrong to kick a bit of rubbish. They're ontologically different. So the second that AI gets to the point where doing violence onto it is an ethically or morally wrong action that is embodiment, bodily felt in a way, I suppose. I think that's the point where we've really encountered the face-to-face. There is an open question about whether that is human choice to confer that status, or whether that is something, how will we discover that AI has that moral responsibility to it? Tough question. I don't know. Yes. Other questions? I saw you shaking your head a little bit about ChatGPT. Can we use AI tools to pray there? So hopefully Q&A, we get to talk about that. Oh, good. So that's perfect. Well, I think that is the conclusion of my talk.
Well,
thank you all
thank
very much.
you.
Hopefully it was moderately
Excellent.
entertaining. Thanks. All right. Well, shall we?
Now, China.
Okay, thank you very much. So hello, everyone. It was great to listen to several of the wonderful speakers. So I'm also I'm trying to give this talk on convergence of artificial intelligence and spirituality. And thank you so much to Reverend Father Kyriakos for inviting me to present on this topic. Okay, so I'll start with the simple definition of AI, which most of you know, and which Professor Ted has already done a great job of explaining it. Basically, it's a simulation of human intelligence by machines. And therefore, the alternate term for artificial intelligence is machine intelligence. So once again, to emphasize, we are trying to make machines think, act, and perform like us, human beings. And most of you are familiar, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with the Turing test, which is named after Dr. Alan Turing. If not, happy to go over the details. But the fundamental idea is, say you are communicating via chat. If you cannot understand, or if you think the person or the entity opposite to you is a human being, then we consider you pass the Turing test. There is also a little bit advanced these days called a total Turing test, right? Which includes the visual aspect as well. If there are any questions, let me know in between. Otherwise, I'll go to the next slide. So one thing I thought it's important to point out these days, all of us know there are a lot of interesting talks on AI, and people tend to alternate the terms machine learning and deep learning instead of AI. But there is a subtle difference. So the image here, I personally love mathematics, so I'm trying to show it as in terms of sets, right? So you can think of AI as the big umbrella or the superset. Machine learning is a subset of it. And then deep learning is further subset of machine learning. And then, when people talk about machine learning, also known as ML, it focuses mainly on algorithms. Basically, these algorithms learn from the data, right? And then they learn, not just learn, they improve in the future for decision making based on the past data. So the idea is, without any human intervention or reprogramming, these algorithms could make better and more sophisticated decisions in the future. That's the whole field of machine learning. And then you have also deep learning within machine learning. And there are tons of other different variations, right? Within DL, right? Like deep neural networks, etc. But on a high level overview, deep learning, which is also known as DL, it concentrates on neural networks with multiple layers. Again, the idea there is to recognize complex patterns and learn from that, right? And then learn from it, use it for better decision making. So any questions so far? I know most of these things you might know, or other speakers here have already explained. Okay, if not, I'll go to the next slide. So one thing I wanted to, when people talk about AI solving problems, right? Something I want to dive into is some of these complex biological problems. So for example, I'm not sure how many of us here know that for each of us, right, in our DNA, we have the length of the DNA, if you calculate, and I have little calculation down below, right, it has, the length is enough to have several round trips from Earth to Sun, right, about more than 300 times. To getting a little bit nerdy into the actual calculations, right? So our haploid genome has about 3 billion base pairs of DNA, right? Which packages into 23 chromosomes. And you can approximately, the length of each base pair is 0.34 nanometers, right? Which means, so if you look at this, you can see my pointers, right? I hope. Okay, thank you. So if you multiply this 0.34 multiplied by times 10 to the minus 9, right? Because it's nanometers, then times 6 times 10 to the 9, because 3 billion base pairs, right? It gives about approximately 2 meters of DNA inside a diploid cell. And then we human beings have about 50 trillion cells, right? Which gives us 100 trillion meters of DNA. And the distance between Earth and Sun is approximately 150 billion meters, right? So it's very interesting how this long DNA is packaged so condensedly inside human body. And personally speaking, this is a little bit, I'm more close to this nucleosome packaging, which we'll see in the next slides, because it was part of my PhD work at Columbia University, one of the projects we looked at. So again, how is this packaging possible, right? So some visual representations. So if you focus on this image, right, on your left side, it's a cell, and inside this is the nucleus, this blue circular thing, right? And inside the nucleus we have these chromosomes, like this X-like structures. Now let's zoom in further, right? If you start to go inside deeper, right, like you will see these structures if you loosen it, so these pinkish, it almost looks like these tennis balls, right? See these pink tennis balls, and you have these blue threads around it, looped around it. So these blue tennis balls are like proteins called histone proteins, and then this the blue thread is our DNA, the double helix DNA, right? So imagine the beauty, how the creation or the creator have done it, right? So much information. So where I'm getting at it, so how is this again? So if I go to the previous image, we went from from the cell and then down this way. If you go back the other way, the idea is this structure again. These are the tennis balls. It's just a different representation. So you can see once again, DNA winds around the histone protein, right? And it is called nucleosome. And then nucleosome coils and becomes chromatin. And chromatin coils and condense to form chromosome. Basically, chromosome has all the information about our genetics, right? And we receive 23 chromosomes each from our father and mother, from both parents. And so as scientists, people in computational biology, or in scientists, this whole function of nucleosome is very interesting, because in one way it is protecting our DNA by forming these stable structures, but at the same time it is also allowing the right information to be used for different biological functions. So, and then this get into the whole field of genetics, or not genetics, epigenetics, where the idea is not just your genes, but your environment. So there's the simple idea is there's a control above your genes, right? So it is affected by the environment, etc. So one, as we, as several of the speakers told here before, as we come up with better AI, better algorithms, we can predict a lot of information about these kind of biological structures. And why it is important is, so if let me go back to here. So if I look at the cell, so there are several studies pointing, if you look at a cancerous cell, for example, right, the packaging of this is slightly different. There are some areas where it is little loose. Also, there are areas where it is a little bit more tighter. So it's quite interesting. So if we can decode somehow, that will result in a lot of revolutionary therapeutics, right? So this is again, this is still one of the, so the work I am trying to show, or little bit show, is from few years ago, but then there are several scientists looking at different aspect of this problem. And then one thing I felt when I was a student at Columbia, this is the years 2010 through 2017, doing for my PhD work, this epigenetics is also very interesting in the sense, my own personal background, my father is a Syriac Orthodox priest. And so we always used to have these interesting conversations, right, about like epigenetics, about how things work. Let me go to the next. Oops. Any questions on these on the slide so far? Then let's go. So again, this conference, right? The focus is AI and spirituality. So what exactly is spirituality? It's like it's man's deeper search of meaning to understand some of the fundamental questions, right? Like, where do we come from? Who created us? How do we connect with our creator? How do we connect with universe, and also among one another? So as a few minutes ago, we were looking at, something very, very deep inside human body, right? At a molecular or even atomistic level. So I believe and I think AI is definitely a tool that can enhance this journey, this spiritual journey, because because all these burning questions. Once again, AI is an intelligence, that will work on massive amounts of data within how to say, within a reasonable amount of time. I can say from personal experience, from a simulation aspect, right? If some of the images you looked at in the previous slides, and when we try to do computer simulations like protein simulation, it takes days, even to simulate smaller structures, right? And then we were still using some AI, but AI is much more advanced. Like, every day we are reaching new heights. So I believe similarly that's more in the scientific aspect, or scientific questions area. But similarly, in the spiritual journey, also AI can enhance us in in opening new doors, or even new ideas. At the same time, we also heard today, right, like AI could also be a threat to spirituality. There is a different school of thought, right? AI could be a threat to spirituality. It I guess that this is a hard question to answer, but I also want to think about a slightly different possibility, right? which some of you also hinted, again, the speakers hinted earlier, is like this convergence of AI and spirituality. Because this convergence of artificial intelligence and human intelligence could open new realms of understanding about consciousness and spirituality. And if we think on those lines, definitely at some point, sooner or later, AI will surpass our human intelligence, right? And it might also initiate some kind of a self-improvement cycle, which can then lead to a new era of spiritual awakening or transcendence. So this potential emergence of a technological singularity is something we should, something that could happen, right? And then from a spiritual perspective, some people believe that this whole advancement could be also part of a larger cosmic evolution, leading towards a higher state of consciousness or enlightenment. And then when we dive deep into this, there are definitely concerns like as we heard today, the implications of AI on spirituality. There is one argument: relying too much on technologies could lead to a disconnect from our spiritual selves and from the natural world, right? Then the ethical considerations is a big it's a big beast on its own, right? There are several things that need to be concerned. There could be potential for unintended consequences, right? But however, if you think about in the past, right, Copernicus was the first person who said Earth is not the center of the universe, right? We are revolving. Earth is revolving and rotating around the sun. There were a lot of oppositions against him. So similarly, any technology you bring in, there is always two sides of a coin, but it really it really depends how we handle it, right? And then if this AI and spirituality lead to a singularity really depends on how various forces will intersect and evolve in the future, right? It's very, very hard to say. I mean, we can speculate for sure, but a lot of research which is already happening, but still need to be going on, and then so we need to see how things come out. But I do think exploring the intersections can lead to a deeper insights into the nature of consciousness and our place in the universe in general. I believe that's all I prepared.
Thank you very much. Can you say a lot of thanks to everyone?
Sure, absolutely. I did have a question for you there, Shino.
Sure.
Some questions. I found it interesting the idea of raising consciousness. Through your research there, what does a raised consciousness look like? What are you imagining with that term there?
I little bit got this. Can you repeat the question once more? Sorry.
You talked about elevated consciousness. I'm
Yes.
interested in what an elevated human consciousness through AI looks like.
That's a very good question. I am thinking AI again, using AI as a tool, to get a more deeper understanding about various things, and thereby elevating the consciousness, right? That's what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we'll discuss that a little bit as a group
Okay.
there. Very fascinating presentation, and I think we'll wrap up our presentations and go into a little group discussion. So
Yeah, like, are we going to do the group discussion? Or?
Yes, unless you have questions for Shino, otherwise we can thank her very much. And yes.
Thank you. And I made you back the host as well, right?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Have the here again.
I actually need to head out, leave a little early.
Thank you, Carrie.
But thank you so much, Evan.
Absolutely.
Very
I
nice
hope that we
Thanks for
can-
your talk today.
Okay, thank you.
I absolutely hope that we can continue our discussion sometime. I'll see you around. You're our GTU student, correct?
I am, and you have my
Well,
email.
You have my email as well. If you're ever up for a little coffee and AI talk, just let me know.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and switch over to Andy. It's right here. All right, we want the best view for our group discussion is, fortunately, Ted Peters, I think you're the star of the show, it looks like.
He's in the center of the screen.
Yeah. Let's see if I can do something about that. Well, we won't worry about it there. All right. Well, yes, let us discuss.
Well, shouldn't.
Shall we? Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're leading the group.
No, I just want to say a few things about. I like your presentation. It was really, I learned a lot.
Oh,
I'm
good.
coming from a technical background. I work for an oil company
Oh,
and, in Canada.
yeah,
So we use artificial intelligence quite a bit.
I
What
bet.
we do is like accounts payable. We used to have 50 people.
Yeah.
So we bought those bots, right? You know, the bots. So the bots can process 150 invoices in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So what it is replacing people with the bots.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one application.
Right.
Another application is where we can do the inspections. You can put the Google Glass and go and look at the machine, and you can see the inside of the machine.
Oh, my.
So all these things are driven by data.
Right.
So the data is the source. How good is your data? The best you can make the decision. So I totally agree with you. AI is a good tool,
Yes.
and but it doesn't have a brain, right? It feeds the data you feed. Whatever information available in the public domain, it takes and makes the decision. So we've been doing it, but at the same time we make it because our data is not good. Whenever the data is not good, whenever we are making these predictions, it is making the wrong prediction.
Uh-huh.
It is as good as the data. The data you feed, that is where the decision. So it says garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
If your data is good, you can predict a lot of things and you get a good outcome.
Mm-hmm.
If it is not, it is. So I like that part very well. The second one I like what you said is, so we have like probably there's 50 bots in different part of the company. That's where we do the customer service, AI,
Yeah.
accounts payable. We replace almost half of our people through these bots. The bots is doing all those accounts payable and people are getting paid. And so the only thing is that if there is any error in the invoice, they don't get paid. As long as every requirement in the field is properly filled, they will get paid. So that is the difference, right? So as good as if the data is good, it works. If the data is not good, it doesn't. Right? But I really like what you said. The 7% is the authenticated and accurate, 47% fabricated, 46%.
Oh, yeah, right.
So that's exactly right. Because if the data is good,
Yeah.
if there is misinformation, there is misinformation, right? And I totally agree with you. AI is a tool, and there is a place for technology. And in when it comes to the religion, I like what he said about the rejection, adoption, and adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a society, and there is a lot of influence. I'm coming from an Orthodox faith, and I truly believe, and so traditionally we don't change anything. But we are living in the second generation, third generation. We have a lot of influence from the artificial. So I may not go, but my kids will go.
Oh, yeah.
Because they are influenced more by the surroundings and more by the tools which is available. I think that adoption piece is probably an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the one group there, they are using the adoption part of their digital technologies and digital So it is. I think that's a very good example where there is a place for spirituality and artificial intelligence. If you don't use, it will be forced us to use. So I think that second point there, that adoption, I think that if the church is smart, and I think that's adoption is probably an area where you should look at and see what can be used, right? Where it is an application. AI has an application, and AI has a place in the spiritual. Again, I don't want to confess in front of the Robert, right? Because that's not my tradition. That's not my belief. I won't do it. But my kids may do it.
Yeah.
Because they are influenced by a lot of other things. So it is better for the church to be proactive.
Definitely.
And do that adoption piece and see what possibilities without risking much on the speech. Otherwise, it will be different. People will go and start doing that. So that's that digital theory and digital tools for study the theology part. I think those people are probably more proactive, and they are probably doing that more proactive. I think the other things are all, like I really like your presentation. So I made some notes here, and I really liked it. And Father Anthony also talked about, he's also more from the traditional Orthodox faith, right? People after the COVID is did something. We never had these online services.
Yeah.
The COVID time we introduced, now people all wanted online services.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to come to the church. Even some people said, "Oh, I watched online. I'm not going to pay the subscription." So people are going to be smart, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference between the technology and the real thing.
Yeah.
But definitely, church needs to look at what are the options and where the technology can help church. It is not going to be convergent, but there is going to be, if there is two circles, there is some common areas between the two circles.
Yeah.
That's where the church needs to look at, because the generation is going to change, technology is going to change. So definitely there is a good place for the technology, but how and what it is used. Just like driving a car, right? Whether you are driving safely or you're driving recklessly. So that is the difference. So you have a tool, how best you use for your own advantage.
Oh, right.
So that's my takeaway from that. Thank you so much and your presentation is also very good about that. So really, there is a place, people are going to use it, but how good you use that is where this whole thing is.
I think as you were talking there, here's a good question that kind of maybe ties some things, because you said a lot of excellent. So your kid, let's say, has a theological or spiritual question. Let's say, could happen, right? And instead of going to the priest, they go to Google Gemini, and they ask the Chat GPT, the online forum there, to help them with their spiritual question going on there, instead of their local priest. How does that strike you?
So again, we are from Orthodox tradition, right? So our priest is the spiritual leader. So I'm sure that my generation, my kids, we are trying to bring them in that Orthodox faith. So they will go to the priest, but I don't know my grandkids whether they will go to the priest or go to the. So that's where it is going at some point of time. It is going to happen. So how do you protect? Or how do you take it back? So that is where the church needs to be more proactive to see that what is the best way to serve these kids. Because my generation, I never had a cell phone when I was in university. So now every question you ask, they can get an answer within a minute.
Well, the Westminster Catechism for the Reformed tradition is written in question and answer form. What is God? Then you get a paragraph. Well, suppose the Orthodox tradition, the Roman Catholic tradition, creates a catechism. Could be big, So that's different than a large language open field running. But it could go online and be a pedagogical tool.
So answering that question. So if my kids goes to any kind of AI tool, the information they are getting based on the information available in the common public domain. So these are all based on the algorithms and machine learning and all that. They come up with answers. Half of the information there is not true. So the information you are getting, to your point, that 47% and 46%, that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So they may not be, they are not getting the right guidance. So based on this, they're getting a 50% probability they're getting a wrong advice.
But I would think, in my mind, they may even get the right answer. It's probably just going to be a mediocre answer.
Maybe.
You know, it's going to be the Wikipedia answer that's mostly right, but gets some things wrong. But what maybe will be missing there, and this is interesting, is that they won't pray with the priest over the issue. And it's a very interesting thing to think, can God work, or, well, can God, is always a difficult question to ask, but does God work through artificial intelligence?
So
is there spirituality within the machine?
Morality issue, right?
Oh, yes.
There are certain things it was immoral for when I grew up. For my kids, that is not immoral. That is okay. So as you go through, so getting an advice or whatever it is probably not a bad thing. They think it is okay. It's an acceptable thing, right?
No,
Anyway, okay.
morality has changed a lot in my lifetime, so I do know what you're talking about. For the most part, it's changed for the better, I think. But yeah.
So what was acceptable as a kid is for me to not acceptable is acceptable for our kids, right?
I observed the same thing.
Same thing, right? So that is where you say, what is the best way? Church is proactive.
Right.
When it comes to AI and spirituality and all that, what is the best place? How you guide? Take the best out of that. They are going to use it anyway.
Oh my! No, that's right. Yeah,
but
it just seems to me the church needs to come up with attractive apps,
safe,
and pages that the kids are going to be wanting to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like the way you presented, and I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And any questions for me from coming from an industry background?
Well, I think you've already spoken to one important thing is we have to plan for job obsolescence. And have you seen in the petroleum industry any new jobs created, or is it all obsolescence and efficiency, or are there any kind of new jobs also being
created for research and development, right?
Yeah.
One of our mandate is to look at routine repeated tasks.
Yeah.
How can you automate, and how can you use the AI tools to come up with just like we have those in the customer service, like we have those Q&As. So it's just like all the questions like a bot. So if you type a question, it will give you an
answer. I had a question.
Sure.
You mentioned garbage in, garbage out data. That's important data there. Do you think it is possible, looking at your industry, for a machine, an AI, to learn to look at the data it's generated? So it generates the data and then look at it and be able to guess whether it's good or bad data. So imagine an AI that you give bad data and it submits a response, but then it follows that up by saying, this seems like garbage data.
So the data
self-reflection.
So the data quality, what you're talking about is the data quality. So the data quality.
Yes. So
the data quality in industry is probably around 70%, right? So that 30% data quality issues leading to poor decisions. So that costs money, that costs safety issues, right?
But I'm imagining an AI that says, this is 86% right, the thing that I just gave.
AI can only do based on the rules you give. You are the one setting the rules, you are the one giving the data, it is processing for you. It is not saying that you make the rule and say if this 5 A, B, C, D 5 fields are correct, your data is good. You are the one saying. There may be another field which may be important, but you are not saying that is important.
No, it's an interesting question there. I'm thinking about like how automating, and can you even automate the judgment factor?
Well, you can do all those things based on what you tell them to do, right? You are the one controlling. It's just like driving your car. You are driving the car. You can go up, you can go down, you can make a poor choice, right?
Fascinating. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much, and thank you.
Well, thank you for your input. This is good.
All right. Well, I think we can conclude there. I don't know if we conclude in prayer or what would we do there. Father?
That's okay. After prayer, you say a few minutes. What? Time?
For the recording, and then I've got to turn off the put on my presenter voice. Thank you all very, very much for coming to this conference. We hope that you have been illumined by the ideas brought within artificial intelligence and spirituality, that you go forward and maybe incorporate these thoughts into your life as you operate with Google Gemini, or however this engages with your life. Thank you very much for attending or listening later. I hope you have a fabulous week.
So let us have a prayer, short prayer.
Yes.
Can you conclude?
Oh, I'll listen. You pray.
No, I read from a special prayer on the Feast of the Cross today, and then you will conclude.
I didn't bring my glasses.
No, you can't. No, you will not read.
Oh.
Just to say a concluding sentence.
Oh, all right. Okay, I think.
Eh?
Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Yeah. Okay.
Let us pray on this day of feast, day of the cross. O Lord, make us worthy to venerate your life-giving cross on the day when you arrive with your cross. Let your cross be a strong weapon for us to defeat all sinful miseries. Moses the prophet struck the Red Sea in the shape of the cross to divide it, which remained your cross, and thus the Israelites were saved while their enemies perished. Lord, protect us from all our enemies, both open and hidden. Lord, have mercy and help us.
In your cross, Jesus, we see suffering, but behind it we see healing, we see death, we see the promise of eternal life. Nest that within our souls and make it grow. With or without AI's help, make it grow and increase our holiness. Amen.
Amen.